All right, welcome back, everybody. This is the Virtual Residency Workshop 2022. It's Thursday, June 30th. This is the mid-morning session. This is the Cyber Ambassadors session, in particular, leading the change, equity, and inclusion, and leading with principles ethics. And our presenter is Dirk Colbry from the Cyber Ambassadors program. Take it away, Dirk.
Thanks, Henry. Let me share my screen and do a quick mic check. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. Trying to decide where to put your faces. All right. So first thing I want to talk about is we're going to do one of our modules. This one's is actually weirdly, it's one of the harder ones for me to teach, but it's also one of my favorite ones to teach. So we'll see how it goes. I'm going to put some curriculum materials in the chat. That's just a link to some materials we're going to use in breakout rooms today. And so it's really helpful if everybody clicks on that link and has it in their browser so that they can refer to it when we go into the breakout rooms. And I will repeat that later too, but that's just there for your reference. The other thing, we are doing breakout rooms, and I'm teaching Henry this right now. We have lots of time. We are going to do breakout rooms based on interest. When we go into ethics, we're going to look at ethics related to certain professions, and you'll understand why later. But I want you to identify where you think you fit the best. Are you a computing profession, an engineering profession? Are you science? Or you don't care and you just want to put A for any? What we'll do is what I'll ask Henry to do is to make groups. They can be bigger this time, but 5 or 6 is probably a reasonable number. And then just put all the C's together, all the E's together, all the S's together. And you can fill in with A's or create their own group of A's. It should not matter. And it doesn't have to be set in stone, but we're going to do some reviewing of materials by profession. And so I'd like everyone to just kind of specify their profession. If you don't, I will ask you again, but if you don't, we're going to put you in the all and you're going to get stuck with what you get stuck. So the way to do this is to click on the participant list in your Zoom participants. And then I want you all to go find your name. And I can't show you because the way Zoom shares the screen. But find your name and there's a more, if you hover over it, there will be a more button and you can rename yourself. And I want you to rename yourself based on C, E, S, or A, computing, engineering, science, or all. So I'll do all for mine so you can see what it will look like. And what's nice about this is it sorts everybody so that when Henry creates the rooms, it should be, he can do it manually and it should be very straightforward for him to just click on all the A's and put them in a room and click on the C's and put them in a room. We've done this before and it seems to work. Henry, let me know if you need help with that. Any questions about that?
Am I correct? You want 3 rooms total, or you want to be broken up into groups of 5 to 6 and then label the rooms based on that?
It is functionally not. If there's a lot of people, you can break it up into 2, but there are going to be doing group work and group works better at a slightly smaller number. So 5 or 6 is a good number. However, is easiest for you.
Okay.
All right. Next thing. So to the agenda for today, like Henry said, we're going to do 2 modules. I'll give you my quick update of the Cyber Ambassador program, which I'll try to be as quick as possible. And then the 2 modules we're going to do from the Cyber Ambassador program are leading the change and leading with principle. We're not going to obviously be able to do the entire modules, but it's a modular based system. So I just picked out the stuff that I thought was interesting. We have 2 breakout room activities I would really like to get to today. So I'm going to go a little bit faster through the slides because I want to do the breakout activities. That's where I think the value is, but I will cover what we're covering first. It's a common disclaimer. This is all done by the National Science Foundation, Cyber Ambassadors. You've heard this twice if you've been here this week. We are intended for cyber infrastructure professionals, but we've expanded the curriculum to include all technology professionals, people who work with technology and are technology experts. We've done, oops, I did not update my slide. So the arrow should be down below. We are doing right now, leading the change and leading with principle. And if you like this stuff, I am doing more training this summer. I would encourage you to join us. And if you really, really like this stuff and you want to try teaching it, I really highly recommend one of our facilitation workshops. And I'm going to put, I forgot to do this yesterday. I'm going to put that in the chat right now. This is the link to the Cyber Ambassador website. And the first post is our Train the Trainers link. And so we're going to do 3 Train the Trainer workshops, or we're going to try to fill 3 Train the Trainers. This is free. It's being paid for by the National Science Foundation funding. So
may I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sorry. Where is the in-person workshops? Is it in Oklahoma?
Oh, no, I didn't say that. They're in Michigan.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good question. I'm in Michigan. They're in Lansing, Michigan. And we will pay for your flights to get here, and we'll pay for your hotel and stuff like that if you want to come. Those of you that have come before, and I know some of you, say in the chat how awesome it is, and don't say how bad it was. That's a joke. All right. So today we are going to be doing equity and inclusion in ethics. And so I'm going to really set some ground rules. So I would really, really like it if, actually I said video on. Honestly, there's so many people, maybe we need to keep video off in this case. I don't want to screw up anybody's bandwidth, but I do want you to be engaged during the breakout rooms. So turn off your email and try to be a little bit engaged when you're in the breakout rooms. You don't have to be engaged when you're listening to me, but definitely try to be engaged in the breakout rooms, because I think that's where the value comes in. We may be telling stories that are uncomfortable. I want people to share their stories, but do not use their stories. So the stories are whoever told the story, it's their story. So we say, be respectful, take the lessons, leave the stories. That's how we say that. And I also want you to be mindful of your participation. If you've talked a lot in the breakout room, step back, maybe let someone else talk for a bit. Or if you haven't talked, take a little bit of a risk and step forward and share your stories. I'm hoping that this is a safe place to share your stories. Assume good intentions from everybody. This can be a delicate topic. That is okay. I have some mechanisms. If you say something that comes out wrong, acknowledge that. Don't ignore it. So if you say something you didn't mean to, we have a word. We just say ouch. Or I'm sorry, when you say something that you didn't mean, you say oops. Oops, I didn't mean to say it that way. I'm really sorry. We're assuming best intentions. The thing is, we don't ignore it. Acknowledge that you realize you said something wrong, because that can be really helpful if it hurt, whatever you said hurt someone. Similarly, if somebody says something that hurts you a bit, again, assume they didn't really mean to hurt you and acknowledge it. Don't ignore it. Acknowledge that they said something that might be hurtful, and you say ouch, and you can have a conversation. If we all assume good intentions, we can have those conversations. If we assume that everybody's just being hurtful, then it becomes a problem. And so we use the oops and ouch, and you can throw it into chat just as a simple acknowledgement. But I think it's really important not to ignore the words we say, because they have meaning. And so let's just acknowledge it when something comes out wrong, and then we can all learn from that experience. All right, Henry would like everyone to rename your name with an _A or A_, C_, E_, S_. Please, everyone do this so that it makes Henry's job easier. And then he can sign up the rooms right now. We've got time, so he's not in a hurry, but this is good for you to do right now. All right, we're going to do another chatter. We did these yesterday. I hope if you were here, you remember. Oh, the letters mean anything, computing, engineering, or science. Just how you self-identify. And the instructions are in the handouts that I provided, and I'll give you the links in the chat. The chatter is everyone type something in, but do not hit enter. I will count you down with 3, 2, 1. And when I say chat, I want you all to hit enter, and then all your answers will float to the top and we can see what's going on. We did this a lot yesterday, so hopefully this is familiar. So what is your favorite computer program? Interpret that question however you want. I want you to type in your favorite program into the chat window. Do not hit enter. You don't have to give a reason. Just tell us what your favorite computer program is. And once you have it, and I'm assuming there'll be funny answers. I don't know. I've never done this one before. So I want you to hit enter in 3, 2, 1, chat. Python, Commodore 64, VS Code, Excel, Screen, Solitaire, Calculator. Oh, these are fun. Anybody do Paintbrush? Slack, SSH, Adobe Creative Suite, grep. Oh, grep. R. These are great. Did anybody do a Minecraft? That's a good one. I was wondering if anybody did a game. Funny thing is, I wrote that question. I have no idea what I would have typed. Pandas, Bash, Vim. Great answers. I was just a little bit just to practice this chatter a little bit. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about leading the change. This is about equity and inclusion. And specifically, we're going to talk about something called unconscious bias. So the agenda for this particular module is we're going to talk about unconscious bias, how that impacts us as professionals, and some solutions and strategies we can use to combat unconscious bias. And this is all based in research. There's a lot of research that's been done on how unconscious bias works in our brains and how we can help things that work to combat it and things that don't work. And so I will share you the best I know of the current scientific literature in this area. So let's do another chatter. What do you think unconscious bias is? So put a definition, don't hit enter, put a definition into your chat window. What is unconscious bias? I'll give you a few seconds for that one because these are definitions. It might take you longer to type. All right. 3, 2, 1, chat. Never experienced but real, a fact. Never experienced but real. I don't know what that means. A fact with a personal twist, being human, your true bias, judging because something feels weird, what you bring that may be harmful, the biases we all have but are not aware of, what you bring that may be harmful. I think those are good answers. Actions that lead to not good consequences. I think you're all around the right idea. To help with this, I've got a video that will explain more what is bias or unconscious bias specifically.
Are you seriously considering her as a candidate?
Just don't trust her.
She's a woman.
She's a woman.
This is a man's
She's
job.
clearly not educated.
Really not. Does she even speak English?
That's not me. I'm not like that. You call it an honest mistake. Science calls it a blind spot. Our unconscious mind is a mysterious and powerful thing. It makes 90% of our decisions without us even knowing it. Our brains are overloaded with 11 million pieces of information every second. Yet we can only process about 40 of them. So we're wired to make cognitive shortcuts, using past experiences to make assumptions. And you know what happens when we assume. Our unconscious mind can put us on autopilot, determining where we sit, who we eat lunch with, who we turn to for advice, and who we choose to offer a helping hand. Living our lives with blind spots can put us in a tunnel. Same point of view, same decisions, same outcomes. We can find ourselves trapped in the land of snap judgments and misconceptions. We've all been on both the giving and receiving end of blind spots. Think about it. Who's talented? Who's able? Who can I trust? Who belongs? We've all been there. Blind spots are part of the human condition. Our choices have consequences for us and the people we interact with. By accepting that blind spots exist, we can stop. Imagine what possibilities exist if we could do it all over again. Different perspectives, inclusive relationships, diverse networks, better outcomes, seeing people for who they really are. People like you, with unlimited potential. We all have blind spots. Once you accept that you have them, you can choose to do something about it. It's time to check your blind spots and focus on what's possible.
Are you serious?
All right. So hopefully that video talked about blind spots. And really what I want to get into you is if you don't think you have a blind spot, then you probably have your blind spot for your blind spots. But let's think about it. What is bias in this case? Bias is a preference for or against a person, group, or thing based on characteristics. And so when we say unconscious bias, what we're saying is social stereotypes and preferences from outside unconscious thought. These are things that we make unconsciously about the world, and everybody does this, and I'll explain why in a second, about all things. And we are most concerned about things that separate us, right? Ethnicity, race, gender, identity. These things are the unconscious biases we might have, we want to fight against. We have lots of other unconscious biases too. So it's actually built into our brain to be biased. It is a fundamental survival mechanism. We have the need to rapidly identify what something is and whether it's going to hurt us or not. And our brains just do this naturally. It is an evolved property. So I can show you that you have an unconscious bias now. Like, how many of you woke up this morning and worried that there was going to be oxygen for you to breathe? Right? I'm guessing none of you thought about that. We had to make this, it's much better for our brain to make the assumption that there's going to be oxygen so that we don't have to worry about it in the morning when we get up, right? We make a lot of these assumptions. We assume that gravity is going to work. We assume that we just are always assuming things because we would not be able to function if we have to confirm all of our assumptions. The thing is, we assume things that we don't want to assume, and it's often unconscious. And that's what we're talking about today. What are our unconscious biases? Can we identify them and maybe move them towards being conscious and at least being able to fight them a little bit? And that's what we're trying to do. The reason we do this is because, like the video said, there we get tons of information in, and we can't function without those assumptions. The reason we tend to have unconscious bias against things like ethnicity, race, gender, and stuff, that is also built right in evolutionarily, right? We've learned, our brains have learned or evolved that people like us are safer. So we define us as the people we grew up, the people we're familiar with, and then anything unfamiliar might harm us. That's a natural thing that we want to fight against. At least I think good people want to fight against that. Things that you're familiar with are comfortable, things that are new are uncomfortable. That is normal, that is good for evolutionary sense. If you see a ruffle in the bushes, you want to be scared of that rustle because it could be a tiger. And if it's unfamiliar, you want to be cautious. And that's why our brains work this way. It doesn't mean that our modern brains want to work this way. It's just what we're fighting against. So let's talk about some classifications of common unconscious bias. And these are just, there's the one I just said, the affinity like me bias, right? We prefer people who are like you in some way. That changes based on your upbringing and a lot of factors. And so it's basically what was like you, honestly, once you were a kid is where it usually starts. There's another type of bias called the confirmation bias, where we're making decisions with aligned with our expectations or belief. This one frustrates me as a teacher to no end, because if you believe something to be true, you're pretty much going to pay attention to the evidence that confirms that belief and sort of ignore the evidence that goes against that belief. As a scientist, this bothers me because it is true for me, even as a scientist. I have to know that it's true, and I have to be very careful that if I see evidence that goes against whatever hypothesis I'm testing or whatever, I have to make sure that I'm giving it an equal account as the things that's going with what I want it to say, right? So this confirmation bias can be really hurtful if we're not aware of it. Perception bias. This is the stereotypes. We had perceived something in the past. We perceive something that we think is similar in the present. And so we apply everything that happens in the past to everything that is happening now. That's called a perception bias. And there's a lot of chat. Am I missing something? All right, I'll read those in a second. But speak up, feel free to interrupt me, speak up if there's a good conversation going on that I need to address. So the fourth one I'm going to show you, there are other types of unconscious bias, but these are the four that, actually five, that can be really good. An anchor bias is centering on a particular fact, expectation, or action. You see this a lot in like hiring negotiations. I don't know if you've ever heard this advice, but you never say what number you want for your salary, because as soon as the number is said, that anchors all the rest of the negotiation relative to that salary. So if you pick too low, you're going to get too low. If you pick too high, there's an anchoring bias there. And so you want usually the other person to anchor it, not you. But it's hard to do. At least you should also be aware of anchoring bias. It's also a good trick to say things are going on sale, because you can say, oh, you're saving 50% because the price is higher and it feels like you're saving 50% when you're actually not. And then there's blind spot bias. And this is really important. This is our inability to recognize our own bias. It's so easy for us to see someone else's bias. It is actually really hard to see and understand your own. It's called the blind spot bias, and it's really difficult, but we do have tools to help you figure out your blind spots and be aware of them. And I'll go through those. All right. So let's talk about the impact of unconscious bias. Hey, Dana, actually, I see you did say something long. Could you, do you want to share with the group what you were saying? Because people are applauding you.
I was just bringing up a case of unconscious bias that came up in the last session, which revolved around the idea that everybody will be so eager to get back to in-person. The implications that come with that are that everyone is able to come back to in-person, and that the loss of the online access is not actually a significant loss for the people who can't. I will never be able to attend PERC in person. I was never able to previously. I very much am dependent on the online access, and folks in the disability community have been hearing for years, oh, we can't possibly do things online. Well, guess what? We could for 3 years. And I very much don't want our communities to lose the access for more people that we have been given by having online access available for low or no cost events, because that's opened it up to a whole world of people who had not been included before. And I want us to continue to be able to include those people as much as we can.
Oh, I love that example. I 100% agree with you. So I tried to do virtual options for all my events before the pandemic. The hardest thing about that was a lot of people didn't know how to use things like Zoom and were uncomfortable with it. What's great about right this moment in history is that I can add Zoom to whatever meeting I'm doing or whatever event I'm doing, and I can be confident that the people will know how to do that on their end. And so that makes me extremely happy that I can add it. I do it for all my classroom activities because I don't want to assume that everyone can be in person. I think that's a really great point. So thank you for sharing that, Dana. All right, so let's talk a little bit. That was a good impact. What is the impact of unconscious? If you don't realize other people's perspectives, you might not be able to appreciate how things need to change or have changed. So all of us, I hope you will believe with me that all of us have unconscious bias, but they're based on our own experiences and background. And the way to get at our understanding ourselves, to get at our own unconscious biases, we really have to understand ourselves. So there's this project called Project Implicit. It's a really great project. I really hope y'all will Google it. It'll be the first thing that comes up. It has done lots and lots of tests that it's developed that measure your responses to questions like, you look at a picture and then you have to have a response. And it's actually measuring the time response to try to measure your own biases. So they have different tests for age, gender, nationality, religion, disability, sexuality, careers, all these different tests. And really taking them can give you some insight on your own biases. And so I'm going to give you, just to ground this a little bit, I'm going to give you an example of one of my biases. So one of my first times teaching, I was teaching an embedded programming course, and it was a lab. I was a grad student. And, you give the lab assignment at the beginning of class, and then you, as the graduate TA, walk around and help people out. And they would all raise their hand, and I'd have to go to them, and then I'd go to the next person. That's just how you taught the class. And I remember there was one particular student I really found to be the most rude person in the world. I did not like this person. Every time they raised their hand, I cringed because I didn't want to go over and talk to them. And I remember this happening. I was in one class. They were just so rude. They raised their hand. I walked over and I remember regretting just this unconscious feeling that I actually hadn't acknowledged until that moment, that I hated talking to this particular student. And as I'm walking over, I'm like, wait, why do I hate talking to this student? Like, it occurred to me, oh my God, I don't want to be here. Like, I'm thinking of ways to avoid going to talk to the student. And I had this moment of, oh my gosh, why am I doing that? And it took me a while to figure it out. I sat down with the student and I'm now aware that I don't want to talk to them, but what is being rude? And so I'm listening to them, trying to pick out the rude things that they're doing. And they didn't say a rude thing at all. They were actually extremely polite to me. And I was sitting there going, and I'm still feeling like they're rude, but I couldn't put a name on what they're being rude about. And it took me a while, and I'm just like frustrated with myself because I'm realizing what they're saying is not only not being rude, but it objectively is extremely polite. They were very polite to me. And yet I had this feeling that I was able to identify. And it turns out, and I figured it out after a while, it actually took me a few class periods, that the reason I thought they were rude was they talked really quietly. And that kind of, why would talking quietly, my visceral reaction be that that's rude? And it took me a while to figure it out, but that's what I was reacting to, that they're very soft voice. And it's soft to the point I had to lean in and listen to hear what they were saying. I didn't know I was doing that until it just occurred to me, right? I got my unconscious bias, somehow something triggered and it said, okay, now it's conscious bias. And I'm listening, and why is quiet so much? Well, then it took me a while to parse this out, but my sister's deaf and she wore a hearing aid growing up. And it was extremely rude in my house to talk softly. It wasn't a verbal, it's rude. We didn't say the rule in this house is to talk loud. That was not the rule. It was a cultural thing in my house that we always spoke loudly so that we could include my sister. It wasn't a written world. It was just a rule that we had. And then when I encountered a student that was talking softly, my unconscious bias due to my raising triggered, and it caused me to think that this is just the rudest person in the world. It took me a long time to figure out that train of thought. Once I had it, it made so much sense to me. And it was so easy then to work with that student because they weren't being rude at all. It was my unconscious bias that was affecting that situation. And it still continued. So even though I knew what was going on, the next time they talked soft, my visceral reaction was, this person's rude. But it was much easier for me to just say, oh no, that's just Dirk being stupid and not a real thing. And it was easier to work beyond that. And so that's an example of a real world situation that I had where I had an unconscious bias and then I was able to identify it. And so the trick is, how do you identify these things? Project Implicit is a really good starting point. A lot of people, it's interesting to see. So let's think about the impact of these biases. So research has shown that unconscious bias are pervasive in science, technology, engineering, mathematics. They're everywhere. And these biases have negative impacts on participation and success of our individuals that are underrepresented in these groups, right? Since everyone has implicit biases, they even have implicit biases whether they are members of that underrepresented group or not. And so these biases become pervasive. And so what we need to do, and so here's some examples. I forgot I wrote this. Men are often perceived as belonging in STEM while women are not. So there's research that have studied this. You want to say that this has changed over the years and that it's better. It's not. The research still says that men are more accepted in STEM related fields than women. Is that a true statement? Obviously not. We are all reasonable people. We all don't believe that, but we have unconscious biases that keep progressing this experience, this gosh, I'm losing words right now. We progress this even if we don't want to, based on our unconscious biases. And the similar things about gender, weight, ability, race, all influence clinical diagnosis and can impact healthcare. And gender and race biases affect perceptions about competence and higher ability. So these are all things that have been studied extensively. Like, for example, what they do is for higher ability, there's been a lot of studies where they take two resumes and they strip out the names in the resumes and any gender identifying perception, and you will get a different hiring rate for women when a higher hiring rate for women when the names are stripped out for when the names are in. And that's clear evidence that we have these biases that are there and that are affecting us as a culture. So let's talk a little bit more about wording and job ads. I'm checking my time real quick. Oh, we're doing good on time. Actually, no, we're a little behind time. I'll have to speed up. So what I want you to do is understand that language is gender coded, right? So different words are more commonly used as description for men and women. These can be identified by doing large studies. The words might not seem masculine or feminine, like, you know, some languages have masculine words, some languages have feminine words, including English, but some are more or less. But they can identify words that don't seem to have a gender, but have are more commonly used in gendered specific ways. And so they can study those words and they can look at those words in job advertisements. And so we call this gender coded language. And then we use that to define who is qualified or who's willing to apply to a job ad versus who's not willing to apply to it. And the wording matters. So if women are less likely to apply to jobs described in masculine terms, using these gender coded words that are more masculine. Whereas using feminine encoded terms has little or no impact on whether a men or women will apply to the job. Women are more likely to apply, but men are not less likely to apply. And so what that's important understanding from that research says, it's better to review your job ads and try to strip out the male encoded gender words and put in, if possible, replacements of female encoded, and you will get probably more applications and definitely more equal applications for as gender is concerned. Hey, and someone's dissertation, I don't know if I'm even going to quote it today. I don't know, but this is awesome. I hope I don't say anything wrong. So this is the activity I want you to do. I want you to accept the breakout rooms that Henry is going to put up. And the person whose name comes first alphabetically will be the timekeeper. I want you to spend only about 10 minutes in there, and we'll give you notes, but 10 minutes. We have a few job descriptions. Pick a couple. You're not going to get through them all, and review them. Focus on the language describing the responsibilities and requirement, and pay attention to the action or description of words that catch your attention. Like you feel that this one might be masculine, you feel this one might be feminine. And again, they're not necessarily obvious, and we'll talk about them in a second. And then what words might encourage or discourage applicants, and what changes, if any, might you make in the job appeal. I want you to think through these, and then when at the end, we'll return to the larger group and we'll talk about it a little bit more detail. So Henry, go ahead and start the rooms if you get a chance. And you're not assigned, meaning you did not. Oh, I can help assign. Oh, this is cool. All right, go to your rooms as they're assigned. Thank you, Henry. That looks perfect.
Not everyone has joined their rooms yet. Everyone, please join your room.
Yes, go ahead and please join your room if you're lurking. All right, how are we doing time-wise? I got a little wordy there. It's now 12:20.
Can you put up something that says, please wait to be assigned to a room? Because people arrive late and they get frustrated and leave.
All right, okay, I'll do that. All right, now I got to read all the comments that happened. There are a lot.
Yeah, okay. And just letting you know that, and I should have remembered this from yesterday, a significant fraction of people have not joined the room they were assigned to. And so
Do we have any empty rooms without
no,
less than
but we have some that are 4 instead of 5 or 6.
that won't matter today.
Okay.
Honestly, 2 people could do it just great.
I think 4 is the smallest we have in terms of have actually joined the room.
I think 4 is a perfect number.
Hi,
No, I
Dirk
got a
and
3 here.
Henry.
Yeah,
I have a question.
sure, go
Sure.
ahead.
Where are the job descriptions we're reviewing?
Sorry, they were in the participant materials. I put the link in. I'll put it in again. I should have done that earlier. There it is.
Okay. And then I will, and Henry, is there a way you can send me back to my room?
I have to figure out which room you're in, but I can't. I'm
Actually,
not
if
sure how
you-
this works.
If you go
Honestly, I
into
would've
your
thought when you
bar, it
came
should have
out
a,
of the room. Okay,
Oh,
so
I
it just
see.
says that you haven't joined it.
Okay, so I should just
Is there a way to join it?
join. Yes, okay,
Okay.
figured it out. Thanks.
Yep.
good stuff. This looks perfect. The rooms look perfect. Thank you, Henry.
Yep. I really should have taken into account that not everybody would have actually joined. Right now, we have, including you and me, 11 people who haven't joined, including some people who didn't join rooms yesterday either. So usually what that means is they stepped away.
I love the fact that NLE has their dissertation on gender bias in advertising language. That is awesome.
There you go. So I tried to give each room a technical theme. I would say I was at least partially successful. There's one room that, because of someone with a technical designation marked, but didn't join, only has one such person. There's one room that has one engineering person and everybody else did not pick a designation or designated all. But hopefully
That's okay.
that'll still work.
I put flexibility in the instructions, so
Okay.
they, as a group, can pick which room they want or which thing they want to review. But we have a ethics, code of ethics for science, a code of ethics for engineering, a code of ethics for computing.
Right.
And so the room is really just going to review one of those code of ethics. And if they want to switch which one they review, that is absolutely okay.
All right.
All right, we got about 5 minutes.
He didn't wait. Somebody came in. I was looking for the right room to put him in, and they dropped.
Actually, no, I put him in a room.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Sorry, I should
You
have
put
said
him
that.
in an under-subscribed room?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think the next person who comes in, we have to put in room 10 or room
Yep.
14.
I like this module, but it gives me a little bit of stress to teach it.
Yeah, well, anytime there's breakout rooms like this, I think it's really stressful because setting up the breakout rooms properly is highly non-trivial.
No, this is perfect though. I'm looking through your breakouts. This is really good. And really, this one's practice for the next one because it doesn't matter what room they're in now, but the next one it will. So this is perfect.
Okay. For the next one, do you want the same setup or re-sort them? If you're talking,
Same exact rooms. So
okay.
that's why I did it this way, so that once they're set, we can just put them back into the same room.
Well, I'm not going to promise that that's how
Oh,
this actually works. It might be that Zoom forgets where everything goes.
well,
I
when I've done it,
promise
Zoom
nothing.
hasn't, but maybe it will for you. But it is absolutely okay if you decide that it's unbalanced to switch them to. There's
Yeah,
nothing
well, what I
repeated.
might do is move some non-themed people into rooms 10 and 14.
Perfect. Yeah, mix them up because there's nothing from the previous room that will need to be talked about in the next one. We're just,
Right.
it's absolutely okay if it changes. Oh, there's a new person.
Yeah, I'll move him.
Two new
And
people.
another one, I'll move him too.
Excellent.
They went.
Looks like Joshua might be in a room by himself.
Who?
Or, oh no, John and Joshua can talk to each other.
What room?
14. Because there's
Well,
a someone.
I moved the new join in there, but he hasn't actually joined the room.
Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping Christopher is participating as well, but I mean, obviously I can't tell. So
Right. All right. Could you send out a? Well, we should do a minute notice. Let's bring them
yeah,
back.
it does anyway because it counts down for a minute after you say close. Do you want them to have 1 more minute or 2 more minutes?
I'm a little worried I'm running out of time, so let's just give them 1 more minute.
Okay.
It will be fine.
It's counting down.
Hi, Dana.
Hello.
Welcome back, everyone. We got 42 seconds still, so we can just chit chat while they're coming back. But don't say anything really good and important. We want everyone to be here for the good stuff. So just only say silly things right now. And you all can't see the countdown. So we got about 15 seconds.
Can I give you quick feedback, Dirk?
Sure, but we can do it in the group too.
Oh, I was going to say publicly. I was going to say that I think it needed to be clearer where the link was to the documentation.
Yes, I did not repeat that link, and I'm sorry. I was going to do it right before we hit go, and I forgot. I apologize for that. Although I gave you guys all the link a lot.
Yeah, and the link is also accessible from the workshop webpage. I mentioned that earlier in the session.
But you're right. It is helpful to have it right when you need it because that's more useful. All right, welcome back, everybody. What did you learn? Type something in, your thoughts about what you learned, and don't hit enter yet. Take a moment to think about what you learned from that exercise, if anything. And then I'll give you a few seconds. All right, 3, 2, 1, chat. Unconscious bias directly informs how we feel about specific words, even if we agree on the biases. Educational requirements. Wi-Fi in this building is awful. That's a good learning experience. The biases are subtle in these job ads. They're very subtle. How can you be enthusiastic about a job you've never had? HR was hoping to mandate emotional responses to work. Very high expectations. Number one's very masculine and intimidating. Buzzword bingo in there. Yep. All right, this is good stuff. So I want you to specifically, these are the words that have been identified by research as masculine coded and feminine coded words. And then this is broke down by each of the job ads. And so there are coders out there. Actually, I'll put the one in chat. I'm just going to paste this into chat. This is a gender decoder website where you can copy and paste your job ad in, and it will identify the words that are masculine coded and feminine coded and tell you whether it's overall encoding, meaning, so some words are feminine, some words are masculine. The overall encoding tends to be generally masculine, or does the overall encoding generally seem to be feminine based on the algorithm that this research has come up with. And then what has been shown, like I said, by this research is that masculine encoded words, women are less likely to apply to overall encodings that are masculine, where it doesn't matter if the overall encodings tend to be feminine. And so it can be very helpful. This is a tool you can use if you're ever going to hire someone. Just take your job ad, throw it in there, and just see if there's a bias there that you might not even be aware of. It can be a very helpful tool, and I wanted to give you something you could use like right off the bat. So if as a woman, I don't divide those as masculine words, does that mean I'm not a feminine woman? No, not at all. These are research-based words that have been identified, and they gave them the name masculine coded, feminine coded. That doesn't mean they're masculine or feminine. They've identified words that are commonly perceived as masculine and commonly perceived as feminine, or actually they've identified the words that discourage, I don't know the research, so I don't know how they did it. We actually have someone who's done the research in this area, might be able to help me with the methodology, but it doesn't mean anything about you personally, but these are unconscious words that might trigger us to make us feel that this is more masculine or feel that this is more feminine. And by the way, this is very culture based. This is very much related to United States and English in the United States. And so if you went to a different country or different cultures, these words will change. And so it's based on the current best research in our culture in the US. Okay, and if you find this interesting, which I do, there's lots of good literature out there. You could read about it. I find it just fascinating to type, like whenever I do a job ad, just type it into that link I gave just to see what it says. It doesn't mean I'm going to change it, but it can actually, usually I do. I try to avoid these words. If they're determined to be problematic, I can probably find better words. And that's my general philosophy. All right, I hope you found that helpful. So let's talk a little bit about solutions and strategies. This is from, there's a video out there you can watch, but these are bias busting strategies. These are strategies you can do if you first acknowledge that you have biases. The first thing is to identify them. If you can identify them and acknowledge them, that gets you well on the road to getting rid of them. Like for the fact that I know that talking softly is a bias I have, it makes it so much easier for me to just acknowledge it. And then what you want to do is identify your triggers. Well, obviously for me, the trigger's easy. They're just talking softly. And then I start feeling like someone's being extremely rude. And I just get that rude feeling before I realize even that they're talking softly. But me understanding my biases can help me work through that very well. Then once you're triggered, which I've done this technique, is you go, oh, that's my bias inflicting me, not my actual feeling towards this person. So you pause, you slow down. A good thing to do is take 3 deep breaths, think through that this is my bias, and you can overcome it with your conscious mind, overcome these unconscious situations. The other thing that I like to do is have a something to drink, especially in a meeting or when I'm giving a talk. And if someone asks a question that's a little difficult, you can take your moment by, stopping and taking a drink. Oh, and the comment in there was someone may consider the opposite, i.e. talking loudly to be rude. That is so true. I am a very loud speaker, and I don't mean to be rude. I try to be a friendly, nice person, but I talk fast and I talk loud. And that has caused me no end to problems, to the point of I try to slow down. I try to talk softer if I think about it, but it's solely unconscious. I mean, that's not an unconscious bias. It's just my nature. It's my style. One thing that my spouse does is when we're in a meeting together, because we work together, I will get a subtle hand on my knee if we're sitting next to each other, and doesn't say anything, just puts their hand on my knee. And that tells me, okay, I got to slow down a bit. I got to be a little bit calmer. And I got to, I'm being not calm. It's just, I got to talk softer. And I really appreciate my spouse for doing that, because it makes a big difference to me. I want people to perceive me not based on my volume and speed, but as I truly am. And, some people like my style. Okay. So what you need to do is, once you have identified and know your biases, know your triggers, and you can slow down. So make conscious small changes in your behavior. So ask for different opinions, try different things, just change your behavior so that if you can integrate that bias or create your own, get used to it and get used to counteracting it to the point where it's no longer an unconscious bias, and it's just something that you deal with and you know how to deal with reflexively. So your reaction to that bias is also a reflexive behavior of what you want to do. So you're trying to reprogram yourself so that, yeah, the unconscious bias might not go away, but you can reprogram how you respond to it, to the point of, I don't actually think I really feel that people talking softly is rude anymore. Maybe that's not true. I haven't encountered it in a while, but I've reacted to it so often over, multiple decades that I really feel that I've got a handle on that I'm not knee-jerk reaction saying, oh, just because you're talking soft, that you're rude. I feel like I've counteracted that. I don't know if I have, because it's unconscious. It's sort of hard to know, but I've worked really hard towards it. And I'm hoping that I'm definitely better. And I'm hoping to identify other unconscious biases, which I know about myself that I chose not to share today, but they're there. I'm working on it. And I'm trying to be better at my own unconscious biases. So how are we doing time-wise? We got 5 minutes, Henry? No, we're going
20
to
minutes. You have till noon.
Okay. Noon, your time. All right. So one of the things that a lot of this research on biases comes out is you can train the hiring committee. Actually, acknowledging unconscious bias right before a hiring session has been shown to drastically reduce the bias. So just saying something at the beginning of reviewing, make sure you're watching out for your own biases. Make sure you're not being biased towards gender. Make sure you're not being biased towards race. Weirdly, just saying it out loud, and you have to understand that it's a true statement, but then saying it out loud drastically reduces the instances of biases within a group like reviewing candidates. The National Science Foundation does this too. They've seen a lot of bias in review panels. And so what they make every reviewer do is watch a video to acknowledge those biases beforehand. And what they've seen is a noticeable reduction in the bias, because I think most people we can say are good people and they don't want to be biased. And just remembering that we have biases and working actively to counteract them is enough to make a measurable difference in the outcomes. So use targeted ads, think about those feminine and masculine words, outreach to people in your underrepresented communities, make sure that they have the ad as well, right? You want to increase your candidate pool so that you have people in your pool that you can pick from to assure that you are making the best choice for every job. Another really good technique is looking to holistic review, where you do not make cutoffs based on numbers or convenient metrics, like how many papers did they publish. It's actually a terrible metric. Really, you look at the whole candidate as a whole and see what they're bringing to the job as a whole. Sure, metrics make it easier to sift through candidates, and a lot of places do it, but they're often biased to the underrepresented people based on those metrics. And so it's better to think through the whole application as a whole. And I know that's harder, but it will help you in hiring. One of the things we've been doing a lot in our department, I love this, it actually makes things so much nicer, especially for accessibility and other things, is we identify what questions we're going to ask so that we have the same set of questions for all of our candidates. And then we actually just give it to them. A lot of people react, they don't want doing that. We want the candidate to give the answer in the moment. Honestly, we haven't found that to be a problem. It is weird how well this works to identify, especially candidates that don't prepare for the interview, right? If we give them the questions we're going to ask them and they come to the interview unprepared, we have a pretty good idea how they're going to act as an employee. And so, but by giving the questions ahead of time, it allows people that are well suited, but maybe not be good interviewers, to really do a good job. And it also, by having the same questions for everything, allows us not to let our biases ask the questions and allows us to have a common framework for everybody. And so we try to do this in all of our hiring, and it works. Actually, it makes hiring, in my opinion, a little extra time up ahead, but it makes it work easier. All right. These were the learning goals for this module. We went through these things. I'm going to move ahead because I'm a little behind, because I want to get to our second activity. I want to talk about leading with principles. And really, in this module, we're talking about ethics. And now the last module is related to ethics, but specifically, we're talking about discipline-specific ethics. And so let's look into this a little bit. Let's ask the 100. Oh, I should have used the Henry dollar. I don't have that image. But let's say this happens. Someone walking along a sidewalk sees a $100 bill on the ground. They pick up the money, put it in their pocket, and walk away. Is that ethical? You can think about that. Do you think that to be ethical or not? Now, here's a slightly different scenario. Someone walking along the sidewalk sees a $100 bill on the ground. They look around and decide no one is watching. They pick it up, the money, put it in their pocket, and walk away. Now, the question is, does that feel more or less ethical than the first question? I'm not really asking the group. I want you to think about that. Do you think the first one's more ethical or the second one more ethical? Maybe you don't think either one's ethical. Now, here's another one. Someone walking along a sidewalk sees a $100 bill fall out of a stranger's pocket. They pick up the money, put it in their pocket, and walk away. Right? Is that third one ethical? I would say most people would agree the third one's ethical. What you actually find is that different people will agree whether the first and second one are ethical or not. Different people have slightly different opinions about that. And we call this a failure of character, right? A moral character is your innate and learned abilities. So basically, when babies are born, they're very self-centered, right? We learn our appropriate behavior from the people around you. And what is appropriate depends upon the culture and your experiences. And so what might be appropriate for you very much might not be appropriate for someone else. Now, usually we can come to we get to a serious enough offense, we can all agree that, murder's bad or something like that, right? But there's a lot of ambiguity, and a lot of that ambiguity comes from the culture from which you're coming from. It does not mean your culture is more ethical than another culture. It just means you have a difference in where your ethical boundaries are. And I think that's what we're trying to say here. And then when you have a failure of character, what you're doing is you have a culture that you were raised in, and that what you're saying is, you know what's ethically right, but you're violating your cultural ethics. And so that's just, bad people. And so, people know that stealing is bad, but they steal anyways, or they know that murder is bad and they murder anyways, right? That's a failure of character. And just because you fail character once does not make you a bad person, right? You have a failure of character is violating basically your own ethical perception. Now, we're not getting into cognitive errors where you're not violating your own ethics, but basically the culture around which you are immersed has a list of what is considered right and wrong. And if you violate that, knowing that list, then, that's a failure of character. And basically I can't do much about the failure of character. If you're a bad person and you're willing to do bad things, I can ask you to stop, but that is a failure of character. It's not something that's easily changed. What I want you to look at is the other side. So I want you to consider the secondary example. So I have a teenager who just started interviewing for their first job in fast food, and they were asked the specific question. You see another employee giving free food to their friends. Would you ignore them, confront them, or talk to a manager? So this is a teenager, and their response was, they would ignore it because they don't know the situation. Maybe those people are hungry, they don't have money, and they would never deny people food. So I would argue, since I'm very proud of my teenager, that this is a very ethical response. It is not, well, it's not an ethical, it is not a failure of character. This high school kid says that, we don't want people to go hungry, which is not that is well within the ethics for which they were raised. However, despite this not being a failure of character, they still don't get the job because what they said was still unethical. And why is it unethical in this situation? Why is this an unethical for them to say they would ignore it? And the reason is that this is a failure of experience, right? In the fast food situation, they can't give out food because that violates the policy, and it's not the job of the teenager to figure out whether it's right or wrong. A failure of experience is not knowing what is expected, what is appropriate, or even how to get that information, right? And so you can have no failure of character, but you can have a failure experience. You can have good character, but still do the unethical thing. And we see this a lot in professions. And so the way you need to make critical decisions, you need to learn what is expected in your area, and then based off that, do what's right in that area. And so let's give an example. So ethical decision making can be taught. And so key features of ethical feature include knowledge. So you need to know what information about ethical issues and where to find them. You need to be able to critically think about the situation, make some decisions, and do conflict resolution. You have to be open and willing to learn about these ethical decisions within your context. And then you want to model good behavior for others. And so the ethical decision making, here's just a problem, and I'll just go through it real quickly. If you have a problem, you want to define the problem and its potential ethical issues, get relevant information and assess that information, identify possible outcomes, and then you evaluate the alternatives with those ethics in mind. You make whatever decision you're making, you implement that decision, and then you evaluate in the end, was the problem solved and were the ethical issues resolved? And the reason we say that is there's a technique for doing this in the professions, and that's called codes of ethics. This is intended to do to help you through that failure of knowledge, right? So there are codes of ethics everywhere. They're usually provided in professional societies. If you join with a professional society, they'll have a code of ethics. The idea behind these is we might have a failure of knowledge. And so it's very helpful to go through a code of ethics for your discipline so that you can be aware of the ethical quandaries that may happen. And so that if your culture that you grew up with might have a slightly different reactionary ethical decision based on the profession you're in. Oh, I don't know if that made sense. I'm trying to talk fast. So what we're going to do next, and we only have a few minutes, so I'm going to try to do this quickly. We'll give you 7 minutes, which is not much time. But we're going to put you in breakout rooms, either primarily computing, primarily engineering, primarily science, or anything. Pick which one did you want to do, either based on what you're primarily, the people with the letter C, E, or S is in the name, or just as a group, pick one of the other ones. And what I want you to do is accept the breakout invitation, review the codes of ethics for your discipline. And then there's a case study at the end. So review that too, and then discuss how you would answer that case study within the context of your discipline. And we'll try to bring you back at 1 o'clock, and I will try to, hopefully that'll be enough time. So if Henry could open those rooms, we'll try to get going on this. And if you have to leave, you have to leave. Oh, and I'll paste the materials too real quick. That's not the materials. Copy. There's the materials again. And they're in the Google Doc or wherever. Come on, join your rooms, please, because people are sitting in the rooms by themselves. There we go. There should at least be one person there to talk to. All right. There's one room that's sort of empty. Join your room, please. If you didn't see a prompt, it should come soon. Joe, did you see it now? It should have popped up. Yep, you're in there. Good. William, if you go into your Zoom controls, there should be a breakout button, and you can click on that and it'll take you back to your breakout room. You are assigned one. Which room are you in? I can't find it. William. You must be in the right room because I don't see you in unhighlighted. Oh, I'm going to put that slide up. There we go. So Adam and Phil, you're going to be added to rooms soon. Trying to decide which room is good. Yeah. Henry's ahead of me. And we're all good again. Henry, we're going into lunch after this, right? Yes, I see that in the schedule. Hey, Henry, we probably should give them a minute warning. I know that was quick, but I don't want to have them go overtime if we don't have to. Too much overtime. I guess I can do it if you don't want to. That's cool, Adam. Sorry you're having a problem. All right, I'm yanking them all back. I don't want to go too late. Welcome back, everyone. Not everyone's back yet, but we got about 41 seconds before all the breakout rooms close. And I just wanted to say that I totally understand if you got to go. I won't be offended if you have to duck out, but I'm hoping you'll stay because we're hoping to have a good discussion. Now let me go back to my slide. $18 seconds that I have to wait. All right, 1 second, give them a few seconds to actually get here. So sorry that was so short. I wanted to give you all time. What my plan is if you need to leave, go ahead and leave. You won't offend me. I want to be respectful of your time, but we're also going into lunch, so we can go a little bit over. What we're going to do now is review what we learned and talk it through a little bit. So don't feel bad if you need to leave. But what I want you to ask you is, what did you learn from this in that very short period of time? Type something in the chat. Type anything in the chat that you want. And I'll give you a few seconds to think through what you learned from this activity. And then we'll do 3, 2, 1, chat. Ethics are in direct conflict with this must be done by date X. Ethics is hard. It is hard. Ethics is complex and needs careful discussion with stakeholders. Anonymous data isn't. Yeah, anonymous data isn't anonymous, almost. Code of ethics can be a guide shield when you have made a tough choice. Yes. High levels of risk in the case study based on the code of ethics. So that's why I think the code of ethics are so powerful, is knowing that your discipline and your discipline's code of ethics can be really helpful. Reviewing them, sometimes they're super long and annoying to review, but taking a few minutes to review them can be helpful. Now, what I gave you was an abridged version. I don't know if you noticed that, but I gave the ones we put in the participant slides were very shortened. And the idea was you can actually go and read the whole thing if you really want to. But this exercise was to introduce you to this idea that there are codes of ethics out there, and that your instinctual code of ethics, which I'm not saying is unethical. I'm not saying you're having a failure of character, but it still might be unethical, because your failure of character based on what you were raised might be different than the understanding the full implications of a particular situation, especially in a professional setting. And so these codes of ethics can be there and help you, guide you through the process, and actually shield you. I think one of you said that it can actually shield you. If you follow the code of ethics, you can be sure that you have something to fall back on if someone questions what you did. You can say, look, I followed this code. This is the code for my field. It is well accepted. And so they can help you make those it can be in your on your side when you have to make difficult decisions. All right. So I did this really fast, and I'm happy to stick around and have more talks about this because it's an interesting topic, and normally we talk a little bit more. But what we did was they identified common sources of ethical issues, basically ethics of failure of character versus failure of knowledge. And we specifically said, what can we do to address the failure of knowledge by understanding codes of ethics? And then we did a little bit of practice. Again, I want to thank the National Science Foundation for paying for all this, and we'll call that good. So I am done. Henry, if you want to close up. And I'll stick around after Henry's done.
Yeah. Let me turn off recording.